Welcome back to All the Cars I've Loved Before, your authoritative podcast on automotive nostalgia, where our guests are unique. Each auto has an era, and every car tells a story. So that's right, you know what time it is. It's time to plug in, get a little grease under the fingernails or toenails, depending on how you fix your car, and slip on that favorite car theme t-shirt, hat, or jacket. Speaking of,
Yeah.
my co-host, good afternoon from the mid-Atlantic, the East Coast.
Yeah.
What is the shirt du jour?
The shirt du jour, and somewhat in honor of our Chrysler fan guest that we will introduce, is,
Right.
can you see it? Dodge Viper?
Got it.
I see. Fantastic. Look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really awesome car.
And wasn't now Bob
Bob
Lutz,
Lutz.
wasn't that kind of his either his brainchild or one of the projects that he really championed from the get-go? But yeah, by the way, I tried to get him on the show, and I think he stepped away. He kind of steps away and kind of comes back to these car companies, but I think he might be fully retired. Bless him if so. So I sent a couple of emails and they bounced back. But hey,
I know you enjoyed his books, several of them.
I read all of his book. He's wonderful, masterful storyteller. There's one book. Oh boy, I'm not going to be able to remember the title. Car Guys and Bean Counters or something like that, which really is just through the arc of his entire career, a lot of the higher points that he talks about. But then there was one book on leadership. I can't believe it's read a couple of years ago, where he goes through each and every, not each and every, but the most important bosses, mentors. He was in the military. His sergeants, and I believe he was in the Marines. And he goes through and talks about leadership through the lens of each of these guys, really unique people. Later in life, his supervisors, managers were C-suite from the big three. But in the beginning, he went to high school in Switzerland, and one of his teachers ended up eventually running for parliament. Of course, he was Bob's teacher when he was younger, but yeah, a really interesting life he's led. Yeah, good stuff. Indeed. All right, so we'll see if we can get him on that show. But pressing on here, geographically speaking, let's welcome back listeners from all over the world. Yes, indeed. Israel, welcome back. Germany, Canada. Closer here stateside. Portland, Oregon. Tuckerton, New Jersey. Tuckerton. You think they had anything to do with the Tucker?
It is possible.
No, actually, probably not. But what was the museum we went to in Pennsylvania? That wasn't the Hershey.
Sorry, it was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. It's called the ACCA, which I never get the acronym right. American.
We need to get somebody from there. That was so much fun. Several Tuckers, bunch of old Pontiacs.
I think they have more Tuckers in one place than any other museum in the world, probably.
Is that true?
Yep. I mean, they had some great exhibits. They had parts of Tuckers.
Right. They had engines. They had the engine cutaways, transmission cutaways. They had
like a little, I'm trying to think of the word, but they had you could sit in front of a steering wheel. Remember they had the recreation of the Tucker sales department? Tucker dealership, and you sat there and did a very, very good impersonation of
that was a lot of fun. Okay, we need to get the name of that website up, because that was fun. Let's get our listenership to patronize that place if they can, but it was really a lot of fun. Anyway, Tuckerton, welcome. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Detroit, Markham, Ontario, Montreal, Quebec, our friends north of the border, welcome. And again, for repeat listeners, if you like what you hear, please give us a review on carslove.com. And let's say we have reviews there. We have all kinds of, I think we have some exclusive content you can't get anywhere else. Of course, on your podcast streaming platform of choice, you'll find everything in the show notes, but there's so much more on carslove.com. You want to give them the link tree, Doug? Are you in a space to do that?
I am. linktr.ee/carsloved.
Yeah, that's our digital switchboard. And between the website and there, that's our social media presences. You can see everything we're up to. Also on carslove.com. I believe it's carslove.com/photos. You can see the carousel where people send us in pictures of their cars, their folks' cars, their kids' cars, car spotting, cars you see around town. It's really a lot of fun. And I called it up here, and I just got to tell you, partner, you did a great job. This looks really good. It's a lot of fun. I see Aiden's Beetle, John's Mazda, and just great work. This is a lot of fun. So our viewers are really getting into it. Speedy Cop,
Yeah.
we got some photos from him, really getting into it. So send us what you have, and we will get it up there. All you have to do is email us, Christian@carslove.com, Doug@carslove.com, or info, the infamous info@carslove.com. So send them in. And the last item I have here before we move to today's guest is last night we had such an interesting show, a lot of food for thought. And it was a gentleman who's a very interesting fella in his own right, but his father is the fella who invented the intermittent windshield wiper switch. And that was just really a lot of fun. And let's see, how did you beat him again, Doug?
So one of our other guests from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, also a Porsche Club member, named Dirk Decker, who we had on not too long ago, had out of nowhere, he had a good time with us. We had a great time talking to him. He actually grew up overseas.
Yeah.
And I think he's lived in the United States since the 70s, and he happened to be good friends with Tim Kearns, and we did hear the story. I hate to blow it out there, but of how they met. Tim had a Porsche 944, and he had a beard and a cane apparently. And Dirk had a 944 and a beard and a cane. And apparently Tim's girlfriend at the time saw Dirk, went over to him and said, "My boyfriend has a 944 and a beard and a cane." And then they became good friends. And per Tim, she's wished that hadn't happened ever since, because Dirk fully pulled him into the Porsche crowd, and now he very involved in Porsche driving events.
Yeah, decades later. And that's what this show does. We hear it time and time again. We bring people together, we make new friends, teach others. We're always learning. So again, reach out, Christian@carslove.com, Doug@carslove.com. Always more to learn, more wonderful people to meet. But be that as it may, it's time to pivot and ask the world famous segue, the prompt here. Doug, how did today's guest land in your virtual garage?
Yeah. So as the show has gained some
matured
and gotten interest, we've found wonderful people through public relations, really, looking to get their stories out, share information about themselves, their background, their companies. And one of the things I'm excited about is the gentleman tonight, who we'll let him introduce himself in a moment. He also grew up in Detroit, just like Tim Kearns and the Kearns family, when Dr. Kearns invented the intermittent windshield wiper. So we're really starting to get that Detroit connection on the show. So I'd love to call that out.
We are a show about cars, so there is that. It seems fitting. Tom, welcome to the show. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing good, Christian, and thank you for having me on the show tonight.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. So tell us a little bit about what you do, and it could be professionally, personally, any projects you have going on. If you've got grease on your fingernails, just tell us what you've been up to in the garage. Where do we start? I know you're busy.
Busy. First off, I'm president and CEO of Ziebart International Corporation, original Detroit company, started in 1959, so 65 plus years in the Metro Detroit area, protecting vehicles, taking care of vehicles, making them look good. A lot of stuff that we do, window tint, paint protection film, ceramic coatings, and of course, from back in the day that everybody our age knows, of course, rust proofing. And that's where we got our start in the 50s from a gentleman named Kurt Ziebart. And that's where we're at today. We still rust proof cars, we still protect them, but we've expanded our portfolio to a lot of other services that we do for vehicles.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I read somewhere that, oh, go ahead. You weren't
Oh,
finished.
I was just going to say, personally, I'm working on building a house, but I'm always, kind of tinkering out in the garage. I've got a 78 Dodge Little Red Express truck. So I'm always out there doing something or thinking about something that I want to change, on the vehicle. So
Right on. Love it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I read somewhere that in the 50s, when Mr. Ziebart was starting, they first thought it was a hoax because rust proofing, how does it, what is this? What are you talking about? But then they saw, they became convinced of its integrity and saw word of mouth that allowed the product to spread. Very important, because then what happened? Well, you got to learn that everybody thought you got to salt roads in the winter, and that just destroys the undercarriage of a car. Now, where I live in Florida, not that big of a deal. But where Doug lives, Mid-Atlantic, Indiana, obviously the Northeast, more and more of a problem. So talk for a bit of how rust is so insidious. Why do you want it? Why must that be kept at bay?
Well, it basically destroys the asset that you purchased.
Right.
Back in the day when Mr. Ziebart was working on vehicles, he came from German, so he's got kind of a German. He has kind of a chemist background, and he was also a master mechanic. So as he's repairing cars in Detroit, he's seeing all of this rust damage as he's repairing body panels and going through the vehicles. So that got him thinking and got him into developing a product and patented tools to protect vehicles, from, rust, that enemy, like a termite. It never stops. It's always there and eating. And granted, manufacturers today have come a long way, have done a lot better job in protecting those vehicles than they did in the 1950s with their e-coatings and their paint technologies and things like that. But if you're observant enough and you look out on the road, you will still see vehicles out there rusting. And I know, Christian, you said you're in Florida, and it's not very prevalent in Florida, but there's a lot of countries where we deal in the Middle East, and those oceanside communities, they can have that salt air that can still affect vehicles
Absolutely.
as well. So we're still out there, protecting, like I said, in the Middle East and some of those, smaller countries, maybe in the Caribbean or out in the Pacific. So we're still relevant. We're still protecting vehicles, and as I said before, we've expanded that portfolio, quite a bit from those early days.
Yeah, and you mentioned you're worldwide, and that's something that I didn't realize, and until I started looking into this. Is that a recent expansion, or has that been going
No,
on for decades?
No, actually, we sold our first master franchise to our friends up north in Canada in the early 60s. If
Oh,
I remember correctly, the Philippines in the early 70s, Saudi Arabia in the mid 70s. So we still have a lot of international partners out there that are, master franchisees, flying the Ziebart flag.
yeah, that's great, and I will tell you, it's so true. A good point you make about the salt air. When anytime you go to the beach, anytime, and I don't live far from the water here, there is just this gunk in the air that gets over, all over everything. And it is that salt. And you do have to be protected no matter where you are. And let me tell you something, bugs are everywhere, rock chips and
Hmm.
dings, paint chips, all that stuff is undefeated. Okay. Because once that starts to eat at your car, I love the way you put that it's termites, because it never stops. It never stops.
Never
It's,
stops. Yep.
it's everything tends towards entropy and chaos. Everything breaks down. You got to protect it. You got to protect it. So talk a little bit about the coatings, which I thought was really interesting in doing the research for your company. You have proprietary coatings. You have films that you can put over top things. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really impressive.
Yeah.
It's a full portfolio of how to protect.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got our original paint coating, which we call Diamond Gloss, which is like a predecessor to the ceramic coatings that are out there now. It's a resin-based formula, so it's leaps and bounds above the old waxes that we used to apply, that's good for a year. We offer a warranty on it. And a number of years ago, we came out with our ceramic Z-Gloss, which is a ceramic paint coating. It's actually 3 layers. That's the process that we've have and developed. So it's got 3 layers on it just from the start. So if people are kind of shopping Ziebart against the competition, just know that you're getting 3 layers from us. And then if you move into the films aspect, which you had mentioned, we've got paint protection film, which, you talked about, the stone chips and the rocks and things like that. It's a 6 mil film. It protects the front end of the vehicle, those abrasion areas. Some people actually wrap their entire vehicles in it. There's a story from the Middle East where there was an individual driving across the desert, and they wrapped their vehicle just for the trip, so it wouldn't be sandblasted for the trip. So,
Wow.
Wow.
so that's some of the protection that we've got there. Then of course we've got on the film side we've got all of our window tint, we've got our metallized films, we've got our ceramic films. They protect, not only do they look cool, but there's a protection feature to those as well, where it's protecting the contents. And what are we as drivers? We're contents of the vehicle. So it's protecting us from, those UV rays and, the harmful sun rays that all come in and, fade interiors, burn us, and do all of those kinds of things. So we've got the film to protect, people and the contents of the vehicles.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And one thing that I read somewhere is that, all right, well, it would make sense if you have something old that you want to stop the decay on. All right, Ziebart makes a lot of sense there. But from the word, as soon as you get your car, it needs to be protected, because the moment you drive it on the off the lot, it starts to deteriorate. So this is not only a solution for cars that have been out in the world and starting to look their age. How much of your business is preventative, would you say, on either a fleet vehicle or a personal vehicle? Is it sort of half and half, new and old, or mostly new? Do people understand that they have to protect this asset from the word go?
The majority of the business is new, and
Ah,
that's the best time to bring that vehicle in because we have warranties for a lot of our products. But we do
right.
see classic vehicles coming into our stores, and we'll hear about it. My daughter actually works at one of our stores as a salesperson, and she'll always text me a picture of a classic vehicle that comes in because she knows I like seeing them come in.
Yeah.
So there's still that element of classic vehicles coming in where people are purchasing them and getting them protected, from, the rust proofing side, or maybe some film to protect, the, paint chips and things of that nature. So yeah, it's majority new vehicles, but we're seeing, like, as you mentioned, fleet vehicles, municipalities are protecting their vehicles to keep
Yeah.
them on the road as long as possible. So it's really cool when I see a little bit of everything coming through the stores.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Good stuff. Good information. And we had a gentleman on the show, Doug. I think it was a few months back. This fella,
Mhm.
Matt. Now, is he in Delaware? He owns a paint
He,
shop. Well, he owns a body shop, right?
he's in Maryland, but close to Pennsylvania. Um,
Okay. Okay. And
Top Coat
we
Garage. Sorry to interrupt
top
you.
coat. That's it. No, you nailed it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for the prompt. So
You're welcome.
he talked about, we really got into talking about paint, the sophistication of the paint chemistry, what goes
Mhm.
into a good paint job. And it really, we all know that painting a car these days is a very expensive thing. So you really have to look at it as an investment. Well, once you paint the car, you have to immediately protect it, right? And so Matt was
Mhm.
really educated us on that process of, what did he call it? Prismatic paint jobs, and then
Mhm.
the flecks of either ceramic or metal or whatever
Or
they are to get
aluminum.
paint
Yeah, yeah,
depth. Yeah, you
yeah,
pay 10, 15,
yeah.
$20,000 on a paint job.
Mhm.
You're going to want to protect that. And
Right. Even paint jobs from the OEMs are quite dynamic because there's certain vehicles that have very soft paints and other manufacturers have harder paints, and we see a lot of differences in those paints when we're doing paint restoration where you're polishing the paints and things of that nature. So, you know,
yeah,
some of the imports that come in, the higher ends, they tend to have a little bit harder paint, but there's a broad spectrum of what's out there, and you have to understand what you're working with.
yeah, it's a really good point. My sons and I toured the
Hyundai. Yeah.
Hyundai plant, yeah, in
Yes.
Montgomery, Alabama. They make all the Santa Fe's, Tucsons, and Elantras, I believe. And they on the tour they said it takes us 17 hours to make a car or something like that, soup to nuts. And about 9 of it is the car sitting in the paint shop. So just to give you an idea of all these complicated moving parts, guess what? First thing people are going to see is that paint job. So yeah, interesting stuff. And I know Doug wants to hop in there and bring us in the way back, but just one more mention. When you think of Ziebart and
I was gonna say, I got a quick story on paint jobs. I owned a
Please.
71 Dodge at one point in time, and it was original paint survivor car. And I was talking to somebody, and
whoa,
I was talking about the paint job on it, and I pointed out a couple runs, and that's when they used to have, painters on the line. And the
no
guy thought,
kidding.
he says, man, I would be mad. I'd take that car back to whoever painted your car. I'm like, well, that would be a little bit difficult because there's big runs on the sills and the rockers, and it was just factory paint from the 70s. That's the way they came out of the factory, and that's the way it was. I said it'd be a little bit difficult to get that one back to the factory from
So
71.
interesting. So yeah, here was a guy that just had a bad day. Maybe
Probably, yeah.
maybe it was the new guy. Maybe he had a bad day, but it happens. Okay, variability in any manufacturing
Mhm.
process will bring you defects, right? So, wow, great story, great tale. Now, before I hand it over to Doug here and we hop in the way back, Ziebart does all kind of stuff. So we've talked here about coatings, but Tom alluded to it. All kinds of accessories. Got to go to the website, ziebart.com. Ziebart.com. We've talked about coatings. We've talked about rust protection. But interior fabric protection, that's
Mhm.
important too. Okay. Window tint, important stuff, as well as the paint protection films. So, I mean, it's really a full portfolio of stuff. Make your car look good, completed. Yeah, you were going to say something, Tom.
Yeah, we've got everything, one-stop shop. We've got accessories for the truck guys. We can get those. The soccer mom that comes in that's been hauling around, 4, 6, 8 kids. We can detail that vehicle inside and out. And we've got, proprietary products, that we can clean vehicles, make them look good. And the majority of our products and all of the proprietary products are made in the United States.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, so again,
Yes.
America in world, Ziebart.com. Got to check it out. It's a really nicely laid out website. You get to a ton of information very quickly. They have a Find My Ziebart widget here off to the side. You plop in your zip code. You see what the closest one in is. Go visit, see what they can do for you. Doug, I'm going to hand it over, partner. What do you think?
Yes.
Are we ready to go back in time to see what Tom owned? And what do you think?
We are, but I know in our pre-show we talked about Tom being a Chrysler guy, and that really goes back to your roots, Tom, because you actually worked at Chrysler as well. And I was hoping you could share a little bit about that, and if you don't mind, um, if we're good with time, I'd love to hear a little bit about your father was CEO of Ziebart before. Ziebart has been a family-owned, employee-owned business for quite some time, as well as I don't know if a majority of Ziebart stores or all of them are franchises, as you alluded to.
Yeah. So, wow, there's just so much to unpack
Yep.
there. So if we
Yep.
go way back, my grandfather worked for Chrysler from like the early 40s to the early 70s, and that's kind of where I got my Chrysler Mopar roots, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my uncle was a plant manager, and then we mentioned Bob Lutz earlier. Actually, my stepmom was Bob Lutz's admin for a number of years.
No
Wow.
way.
Yep.
So
So,
neat.
yep, both in Highland Park, and then when they moved to Auburn Hills. So,
Gotcha.
it was kind of my hero company where I wanted to work for them, and I got my chance in the mid '90s. I started at Chrysler Financial, and then moved over to Motors. I was always on the finance side for my stint at Chrysler. So I started in like IT finance, so I supported their IT department with their finance. But then the back half of my career at Chrysler was in product development finance. I was an area finance manager, so for me that was really cool. Kind of, I call myself, a closet engineer with finance tendencies. So engineers didn't really like me when I'd call them out on some of their costs and things like that, because being a car guy, I kind of knew how much stuff would cost.
Yes.
But the cool part about that is, I got to, work with the engineers. I made friends in the dyno room, and I'd get to take home cars once in a while, and I give evals to the engineers so they kind of see what maybe a regular person might be thinking about, on a product. Because sometimes, as you know, if you're too close to the product, you can overlook some things and things
Yep.
of that nature. So
All the way.
they give it to a lot of different people to try those vehicles out so they could get different perspectives. So that's kind of my high level, Chrysler story, if you will. And I know Doug or Christian, you'd mentioned talking about Ziebart a little bit. So I've had actually a couple different stints at Ziebart. I had worked there, worked here, when I was finished up high school, and I was going to a community school working on my degrees. We had a manufacturing plant at that time, and I'd run the mail back and forth between the two facilities, and took a break off to finish up my degree, and then came back and worked at Ziebart for another few years before I left for Chrysler. But you had mentioned my dad had worked here as well. So my dad had worked here since the late 70s, and then in the early 90s, he facilitated what's called an ESOP program, an employee stock ownership program.
Nice.
And that's been in place just over 30 years now. So he's taken a step back. The last couple of years, he just celebrated a birthday, and he keeps telling me, he's like, when you don't want me to come in, just let me know. But he's always a part of Ziebart. He's always welcome to come in. And I told him, if, hey, if you're 90 one day and you want to come in and balance your checkbook and take a nap in your office, come on in and do that. I just want him to get out of the house and stay as active as possible.
Yeah.
But for the last couple of years, I've been, in charge. I've got a great team that supports me in the decision making and the direction of the company. So, it's not just me, it's the entire team that is growing the company at this point in time.
Good job. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That's nice legacy. I love the family connections. Like, you can't beat it.
Yeah, and he's around. He's like kind of he's a resource if we need it. He's a historian, so he's got a lot of knowledge that we'll use from time to time, and I'll bounce ideas off of him, kind of behind the scenes and things of that nature. But yeah, great resource, and I know there's a lot of people that utilize him, when he is in the office.
Yeah, yeah, and of course he's very proud of you.
Of course.
And your daughter's involved.
And I of him as well.
Yes, yep, absolutely. Love those stories. Yeah, so we detoured, but Christian wanted me to pop you in my DeLorean and take you back to your first car. And no surprise to our listeners, it was a Chrysler product. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was a 1970 Dodge Monaco station wagon, 9-passenger station wagon. And as far as station wagons go, it was probably top of the line in terms of options that it had on it. It had, the auto temp, air conditioning, cruise control, rim blow, AM, FM, with the thumb wheel dials, power windows, had power 6-way seat. It had what's called the dual package on it. So it had dual snorkel air cleaner, had dual exhaust from the factory. So it was a pretty loaded car, had a sure grip, you name it, it had it on it, So the only bummer part was it had about 140,000 miles on it when I got it, and it was a great car. I loved it. My friend.
Wait, it had 140 on it when you got it?
Yeah.
Wow, battle wagon. Right on. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So that's kind of what, it was like I said, Chrysler was my hero company. I wanted to work for them, and that was kind of the start where I started reading everything that I could find, Carcraft, Hot Rod, everything about, hopping up cars and engines and camshafts and all of that stuff. And then it's just progressed over the years.
Yeah, and your grandfather helped you buy it. Where did you find it, if you recall?
Actually, it was his car, and,
awesome.
and I bought it from him, and he had, being that he worked from Chrysler, he got it off the executive lot at the time, and that's probably why it was so loaded with every option that you could get on it, because it was probably some executive car at some point in time.
Right. And so that was your high school car. You could fit I
A
know
lot
you
of
said it's a
people.
9-seater, but you probably put a few more than that in there, Tom.
Yeah, a couple more in there than that for
Yeah.
sure.
And we like to ask about a favorite song that might come to mind, and a car with 140,000 miles, especially with all those options.
Hmm.
I don't. Did the radio work in that car?
It it did, but not
Not
too
well.
well. And I know
Yeah.
we had talked a little bit before we came
Yes.
on, and a lot of the vehicles that I had, if the radio did work, it was AM, and in the Detroit
Hmm.
area here, it was like Honey Radio. But then a lot of the cars, the radio didn't work. And one of my other cars, actually from the factory, was a radio delete car, and I had driven that daily for a number of years. So I can't say that there's
Yeah.
one song that sticks with me because
Hmm.
I was more into that the hot rodding scene than the
Yeah.
music scene.
Yep.
So, that's what I was about. Just
Yeah.
cars, engine, and smelling gasoline.
Yep. You had the windows down, and your soundtrack was your engine
The
Yeah,
and
engine,
the
pretty much.
exhaust. Yeah.
exhaust notes. But
Yep.
yeah, my
Yep.
favorite band is the exhaust notes.
I thought it was drive shaft.
There you go.
Yeah. So, and what happened to that car?
I was convinced to sell it,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So
Hmm.
I had sold it to some guys that I know, and they ended up, taking it apart for the engine and
Hmm.
junked the body, and then, the parts went wherever they went at that point in
Yeah,
time.
they lived on,
Yeah,
and that car lent itself to your next car, which was also
it was also a Dodge.
Yes. Tell us about it.
Yep. The one that I think the one that we're talking about, it was a '67 Dodge
Six.
Coronet.
Yes.
Yep. It was, yeah,
White.
we actually found it in Florida, and it was about 1986, and we left a note on the windshield of the vehicle asking if they were interested in selling it. So my dad, my brother, and myself were down there on vacation visiting our grandparents, and we got a call that they wanted to sell it. So
Wow.
we traded in our airline tickets and paid $500 for the car and drove it home.
Wow. Wow.
So
That had to be a fun road trip, and
yeah,
the
it
car
was
made it.
it made it. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
no problem. I don't remember how many miles were on it, but
Yeah.
it made it. It was a 318, and those engines seemed to live on forever. And
Yep.
I think we got 20, 21 miles to the gallon with it, coming back. Back then the speeds were 55, so you'd push it to 62 or something like that, coming
Hmm.
north.
Yeah. No, family road trip,
Hmm.
and for the listeners, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. The Coronet was considered a sporty coupe, correct? Do I have that
Yeah,
right?
it was it was a higher line in the Dodge
Hmm.
lineup, and they had several models that you could order, from a base Coronet up to a higher, Coronet 440, and eventually that evolved into the Coronet RTs and the Super Bs. They were all based off that same B body. So, in a Coronet B body, you could get, depending upon the model, anything from a slant six all the way up to the mighty 426 Hemi.
Wow. Yep. And so I have to ask, do you still own that car?
I do not own that
Okay.
car. Yeah,
Okay.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
I cut it up for parts, and I
Yep.
still have parts. Not any big parts, but I got bolt buckets with bolts in there from that car, and I run
Nice.
across them from time to time.
Nice. Nice. Well, you mentioned it earlier. You have a 1978 Dodge Little Red Express truck, and maybe some of those parts actually work, and maybe the bolt's the right size. Have you had any crossovers?
No crossover on
Not
that
yet.
one. That one
Yeah.
is it's a fairly low mileage vehicle, 80,000 miles, but I pulled the engine out of it and rebuilt an engine. I did an E85 engine, so it runs completely off of, E85 these days.
Wow. That's awesome. And you did a lot of the work yourself, it sounds like.
I did all of the engine work myself. I didn't machine it, took it to a machine shop,
Hmm.
but I
Sure,
gave them
sure.
all the specifications that where I wanted the bores,
Oh,
you know,
wow. Yep.
honed out
Yeah.
to and all of that good stuff. So
Yeah. Wow. I'm in awe, and I don't know if you've heard of McPherson College in McPherson, Kansas. Or
I have
some
not.
people call it McPherson. So they are the only, and I mention it because we interviewed a instructor and student from there, but they are the only automotive restoration college 4-year program in the United States, and they got a lot of acclaim in the news because a couple years ago they came in second place in Pebble Beach with what was it, a 1955 Mercedes?
I think it was a 53 Benz. Yeah.
53. Yep.
Gorgeous
Yeah,
automobile.
yeah. So I mentioned that for our listeners, but also my interest. So I want to learn to rebuild engines, and so they have for 25 and over crowd, they have summer camp effectively, and they offer different things, including wood. I guess I'll say wood repair.
Okay.
Wood for those classic old cars.
Because the
As well
body
as,
was
and,
wood on
yep,
cars 100 years
on
ago.
many,
These sort of
yep,
vintage, these
or
very old cars they
frames,
restore.
yep, or frames, yep, absolutely. And I'm going to take an engine rebuilding class, hopefully next summer for a week. So
Yeah, that's
fingers
pretty
crossed.
cool. A lot of details you got to look
Yep,
at.
yep. I want to be like you. So we'll get there. Just I need a beater to start with. I actually have a couple of them, but they're too complicated for me to mess with. So yeah. So we talked about the Little Red Express, but tell us about your daily driver, which I think is also a Chrysler product.
It is. My
Yes.
daily driver is just it's a Ram, Cummins 2500.
Mm-hmm.
Just a nice truck. Yeah, I do a little bit of towing here and there, so it
Mm-hmm.
gets the job done and it gets great mileage. So I'm a big proponent for diesels.
Yeah, and I read something interesting in the news. I think it was on Jalopnik, which is a popular online car
Hmm.
magazine, that people are buying old diesel trucks because they feel they're apocalyptic proof. They're not subject to emissions, especially
Hmm.
in, I learned in Christian state of Florida, there are no emissions on any car, no emissions testing at all.
This
Is
is
that
Florida,
correct?
man. We don't do
Yep.
rules. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, the diesels are just so sought after. They're so well built. They're so well engineered. I mean, they're just amazing engines.
Yeah, especially the old ones because they're not
Yes,
saddled with all of those emission controls. And if you're
exactly.
not out rolling coal, which a lot of
Yep.
guys like to do,
Yes.
they get the job done. They make a lot of
Mhm.
power. They're great for towing. Their
Yep.
longevity is great, and they get great mileage.
Yep.
I'm curious to what my truck would get if I didn't
Mhm.
have all of those emissions on it, because right now running around town, I'm getting 20 miles to the gallon with my truck.
Mhm.
And then as soon as I
Yeah.
see the DPF come on, I lose about 2 miles per gallon. So I've always questioned, you got to burn more fuel to make it run cleaner, but I am
Yeah.
getting worse gas mileage or worse
Right.
fuel mileage,
Right. And go into the pump more. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Everything in life is a trade-off, gentlemen. Everything in life is a trade-off. So, as we guide the podcast gently to the off ramp here, Tom, got one. You wanted to share something, a cause that's important to you, something called Mission 22.
Mhm.
Can you take just a minute or two to talk to us about what it is, what it does, and why that means so much to you?
Well, I think it's actually bigger than the Mission 22 cause.
Yeah.
We, as a franchisor, have made the decision for veterans and people who serve, whether it's firemen, police officers, etc. We value what they've done for us as individuals. We value what they've done for countries. So we don't charge a franchise fee for those individuals when they come to Ziebart and if they're interested in starting a Ziebart. So that's one of the things that we do for veterans. The other thing that we do in the last couple of years is we partnered with Mission 22 to help them with their cause. They're a nonprofit, and Mission 22, focuses on veterans' mental health, their wellness, community support, and helping veteran families deal with everything that those veterans have had to deal with, whether they've
Yeah.
served overseas or not, to help them with just some of those, life activities that might be challenging or whatever challenges that they might have on a daily basis. So we've partnered with them the last couple of years to help them out with their cause.
Wonderful. Thank you. That is beautiful. Thank you for supporting that mission.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
yeah, one footnote, Doug, we're going to do something I'm inventing on the fly called
Do
a
it.
digital footnote. A digital footnote. On the way
Yeah.
out here, Tom mentioned something in the pre-show, And I looked it up while we were on doing the program. There is a old commercial. I can't, from the, Tom said early to mid 70s. I think that's right. There's a YouTube video, a Ziebart commercial with Rod Serling, the Twilight Zone fella, where he, Tom's right. They cut a car in half, and then Rod Serling starts talking about, look at all the nooks and crannies. You need a product like Ziebart to get way up in there. So do yourself a favor, and maybe we can throw this in the show notes. We can link to it directly. Rod Serling, Rod, Serling, and then Ziebart, Ziebart. Just type in Rod Serling Ziebart, and it will put a smile on your face because it's so outrageous. And on that note, I got to say, Tom, it was wonderful having you. Thank you for making some space for us in your schedule, and it was a delight to have you on.
Christian and Doug, thank you for having me and making this, so easy to get through this. I appreciate it. And, I love talking about cars, my cars, and just hearing everybody's stories about, what invokes, their passion, invokes, that those feelings that cars bring.
You got it. Thank you again. It was a pleasure, and you are welcome here anytime.
Thank you, guys.
Have just heard, you bet, you've just heard the high revving, low mileage, late model heard round the world authoritative podcast on automotive nostalgia. He's Doug. Reach him at doug@carslove.com. I'm Christian. Reach me at christian@carslove.com. He was Tom at Ziebart. If you like what you heard, please follow and tell a friend. It helps us grow and meet wonderful people like Tom. Try out carslove.com, especially the carousel, in our link tree at
linktr.ee/carsloved.
Our digital switchboard. I'm sure we'll see you at the next local car show, showroom, race strip, or concours. We appreciate you taking a lap with us, and we will see you next time. Thank you, listener land.